Hey, hello everyone. Welcome to another YouTube video. Okay, so this video is designed to help the really new players of Dead by Daylight. Specifically, people that want to get better at Survivor and they're really new to the game and they just don't know how things work and they just want tips to get better. Yeah, I'm going to give you a bunch of tips. Very basic stuff, nothing advanced, nothing even like intermediate. Before we get into anything, first thing is, you just have to play and practice these and you'll just get better. It takes a little bit of time. A lot of people pick up this game super quickly. This game took me a long time to pick up. Let's get into it. I'm going to give you just a quick summary of what the game is, and then I'll go into my basic looping tips, and then we'll go into other things in another video for basic, I guess, just survivor mindset, what you want to do when you're starting out. So really quick, the game is a 1v4 1 versus 4 game. The killer is the one, and there's 4 survivors. The killer must kill all the survivors to win, and survivors must repair 5 generators to open one or both gates on a map to escape, so they survive. Killers use their weapons to hit survivors, and it takes 2 hits to get a survivor down. And then once they get them down, they can place them on a hook, and then the survivor on the hook can't get off. And so another survivor will have to go and get that person unhooked. Survivors have pallets and windows to use and run from the killer. So now that you know what the game is, I'm going to give you some very basic looping tips. In another video, we'll go with basic survivor mindset and what you want to do as a survivor starting out. So the first thing is kind of a settings type of thing. You do want to go into your in-game settings. If you play on controller, so if you play on console or you use a controller on PC, you honestly should put your survivor sensitivity at 100%. If you feel that's too much and it's too crazy, I'm pretty sure it starts at 50. So work your way up, go to like 75 and then 80 and then 90 and then 100. Or just go to 100 right away. You might think that's not good, but for later when you need to do juking and spinning and 360s, things like that, it becomes so much easier, and it is a necessity and a must-have to have it at a high sensitivity to pull those things off. You don't need it at 100, but 100 I would say is easiest. So just work on that. If you do have a mouse and keyboard, it's kind of hard to explain for that, but you can go to the in-game settings and turn it up high. You can kind of look at my gameplay and you'll be able to see what it's kind of like, and you can kind of match that. Just go with what's comfortable, but put it high. You can go to your mouse settings and increase that, use your DPI, or you can go to in-game settings. However you do it, just make sure it's quite high, but nothing too crazy. So now that we're done with the settings part, let's get into the very first tip. This is very basic, and this should be the first thing you do all the time, no matter what, when you're looping around something. You want to hug the objects as tight as you possibly can. Doing this will close the gap, or it'll stop the gap getting closed quicker than if you don't do this. If you hug objects tightly, and I'll try to put game clips of what I'm describing at the same time. If you hug objects as tight as you can, the gap that closes between the killer and you takes longer than if you run wider. So if you're running by a car, you want to be right next to the car. You don't want to have the car have some space and then you. You want it to be the car and you. And then you run around until you need to throw the pallet down. So that's the first thing. Hug objects as tight as you can. This will increase the time for your team to do generators, and it takes longer for the killer to get you. So that's the first thing. Just hug objects. The second thing is that you're going to want to look behind you often. Don't always look behind you. Don't only run from the killer, only looking behind you. That's bad. But you do want to look forward and then go backwards, and then forward and then go backwards. Go forward for 3 seconds, backwards for 1 second. Doing this does take some practice, and it takes a little bit to get used to, but soon, doing this enough, like all these things, become easier, so you just have to do them. Look behind you often. When you're running into a building or a wall or something like that, or a tile, you want to look behind you to see where the killer's going. So if you are not looking behind you, you may go this way, but then the killer may just cut you off and go to the other side and try to meet you, and you were never looking so you just go down when you could have avoided it. That's the thing, is just look behind you. It takes time to practice, but just look behind you. The next thing, this is a really common mistake that new players make, and it's just not good. You may think it's good and it's safe and it protects you, but it is very inefficient and can screw over your teammates later on when they're getting chased. Do not camp pallets. What this means is don't go to a pallet and then just wait there to throw it down, because you can be going to the pallet and run to the object that is around the pallet and have that in between you and the killer. The reason why that's better is because the killer, I see this a lot when I'm playing killer, and I'm not a high-ranked killer, so I end up playing low-ranked survivors. So I see this a lot. If I see a pretty short object and I see that they ran to the pallet, but I don't see them moving around the pallet or behind the object, I know that they're crouching and they're just sitting at the pallet. So I usually fake one way, and then I swing, and I usually get a hit, and then they throw the pallet down. It is not good. Most of the time, the killer's going to know when you're camping a pallet. You should rarely do this. I say rarely because it's unsafe. Killers know when you're camping pallets, and if you're going to camp a pallet, just throw it down early. You don't always need a stun. A stun duration is like 2 seconds long. You don't need a stun all the time. Don't camp pallets. You're going to burn through pallets really quickly than if you loop the objects and hug them tightly and run around them as many times as you can before you actually have to throw the pallet down. Okay, so don't camp pallets. It's pretty unsafe, especially when you're new. A killer may know you're there and they may fake one way and then just swing through and get you. That's not good. Okay. Next thing, which kind of goes with this, if you are running around a pallet and you get hit, but you are kind of close to the pallet, if you get hit and run through the pallet, do not throw the pallet down again. You might think this is good. I'll tell you why you might think it's good. You're thinking, okay, I got hit, I'm going to throw the pallet down, they're going to have to break it, it'll give me more time to get away. This is actually not good. First of all, it wastes a resource that you can use, or that you can use later, or another survivor can use. It wastes that because you dropped it when you already got hit. They're made to protect you and stop you from getting hit. When you're hit, do not run through it and then throw it down. When you get hit, you get a speed boost, and I would say you run at around 150%, maybe 140, something like that. You are faster than the killer when they hit you, and you run that way for 3 seconds. As soon as you drop that pallet, you eliminate that speed burst, and you go back to your normal 100%, while the killer can catch up to you. A lot of killers are 115%, so they're 15% faster than you. Some are 110, and there's the occasional where they're just really slow. And some killers have their powers enhance their speed to make them even faster. But that's just numbers. Again, don't run through a pallet and then drop it after you've already been hit. Just run away, get distance, and run to another pallet. It's important, okay? Do not throw the pallet down after. Sometimes when you're running and you're right there and you throw the pallet down, but you got hit right before it, that's okay. It happens. It's called getting dedicated. It happens. That's not really in your control too much. It is, but you're using it to survive. But if you know for a fact that you're going to get hit and you do, and then you run through and drop it, that's not good. You need to just run away. It will save the resources, and you will get that extra speed boost to get more distance away from the killer. Okay, the next tip is a little bit advanced, but if you can do it now, you're going to be accelerating really high with your skill level. Try to use windows more often than pallets, if you can. For example, if you go to Shack, which is a building that looks very similar on almost every map, it has 2 doorways, a pallet on one doorway, and then a window on one side of the wall. So what I'm saying is you want to use the window vault more than the pallet if you can. If you're in a chase, you can vault a window 3 times before the entity blocks it off. The reason Dead by Daylight does this is because of balancing, and they just need to do that. But you can vault 3 times, extend the chase way longer than if you just throw down the pallet, even if you get the stun. You can use the window vaults all the way through and then use the pallet, and you increase the chase possibly 3 times as long as if you just use the pallet first and then use the window later. Doesn't matter. Use the windows more often than pallets if you can. Sometimes there's no windows near you and you just have to use pallets. That's totally fine. I'm not saying don't use pallets and go for windows first. But if you are around an area where you see that there are windows or vaults, whatever you want to call them, near pallets, you should try and make it to them first. If not, then use a pallet. That's a little bit advanced, but not really. It's very simple to do. So if you can learn that, you're going to go way above your teammates and be better than the killer. All right, the next tip is talking about the 2 types of pallets. Pallets are the exact same on every single map, but there are safe and unsafe pallets. You might be like, what? A pallet should always be safe. It's used to protect you. You're right. But there are safe and unsafe pallets. A safe pallet is where a pallet has longer or just bigger objects around it so that you have more time to run around, and it takes the killer longer if they were trying to meet you on the other side. So that's what a safe pallet is. It has bigger, longer objects. It takes longer for the killer to reach you if you are vaulting back and forth. An unsafe pallet is where it's smaller objects. You know, there's a pallet and there's maybe just a rock or something around it. It's an unsafe pallet. It's a shorter, smaller, doesn't take as long object. Doesn't take as long for the killer to get around the object to hit you. And so that's an unsafe pallet. How you use safe pallets, you should try to always use safe pallets more often than unsafe pallets, but sometimes you just can't do anything about it and you do have to end up using an unsafe pallet. And if you go to a safe pallet, just try to use it as long as you can. Hug the object as good as you can, as close as you can, to make the chase last longer, and then use it when you need to. If you're running around still and you end up going into an unsafe pallet, what you want to do is just throw it down and try to get the stun. If you get the stun, immediately leave. Just leave. You might think, no, I should loop it longer. It's a pallet. No, it is unsafe, and you will get mind gamed very easily. Okay? So you just need to run if you get the stun. If you don't get the stun and you dropped it, you should just leave anyways. Sometimes the killer will try to mind game it, and they may give you more distance like that. But how I look at it is, if you're at an unsafe pallet and you drop it, you either get the stun and get distance, and if you don't get the stun and you just leave, they either mind game themselves, which can happen, and you get distance, or you get hit. So if you don't get the stun, it's either have a chance to not get hit, or definitely get hit and get mind gamed pretty easily. So that's how you use safe and unsafe pallets. Try to not use unsafe pallets and loop them. Try to loop the safe pallets, and when you go to an unsafe pallet, just try to get the stun as best as you can. And now we are back down to our last tip. If you are running from the killer and you look behind you and then you look in front of you, you don't know where they went. If you're at a corner of the wall, try to get 2 sides of where they can come at you onto the screen so that you don't have to look and keep turning your camera. You can just leave it there and you can have the best time and most time to still run from the killer, rather than if you looked and then they came from the other side and then you look at the side they came from and then they are a little bit closer to you than you thought, then that's bad. So if you are not at the corner, then I would just say vault or go to a pallet and wait. But anytime you don't know where the killer is, you should go to a place in the structure that you're at and just wait at a spot that is safe for you to run away from the killer if they come at whatever direction. And you want to position your camera so that you can see the sides. And that's kind of it. Okay, so these are my basic looping tips. Okay, the next video I'm gonna have will be about just basic like survivor strategies, and not anything necessarily looping, but just things you want to do that go with gens or unhooking, things like that. and then I can give you some other just general game advice in another video. But that is kind of it right now. So thank you for watching. I hope this helped. Keep practicing these. You're gonna get better really, really soon. All right, thanks guys. Bye.